Hello and welcome to this video. Last Friday, I premiered a concert at my studio with the British jazz guitar legend Jim Mullen. And this elicited quite a response from various people all over the world. The incredible guitarist Stanley Jordan actually messaged saying that he thought it was a wonderful video and had lots of great comments for about Mr. Jim Mullen. And I also had a message from this gentleman here, who, of course, you could see is Mr. DOMINIC Miller, session guitarist, songwriter, guitar legend, and of course, probably most well known for playing guitar with Sting. And Sting is a musician that's been with me for the last 45 years, from when I bought Regatta to Blanc back in, I think, 1980. You know, when I first got into music, I ended up playing in a Police tribute band for many, many years. So I've really studied that material, but Dominic's had a very wide career. But I would like to start, Mr. Miller, if we can, with what motivated you to message me about the Jim Mullen concert?
Well, actually, I've been meaning to message you for a while because I've been on tour for all year. I mean, I'm usually on tour. And in the last couple of months, because my YouTube algorithm, if I click on, how you click on something and then they show you something else, so I've been getting your videos regularly. And while I've been on tour in America, our drummer, Chris Mass, I've been turning him onto it. So while we're sitting in the van, we're watching your videos, like the top 10 overrated drummers, underrated drummers, overrated guitarists, underrated guitarists. And there was one video we saw which really caught our attention, and that was the video about crisps.
I bet all of them, Chris. If you can do that, it'd be really good.
You did something, the top 10 crisps.
Did it make you feel homesick, did it?
Well, it did actually, But I mean, although I will say you did miss out. I don't know if I got to the end of the video, but I don't remember seeing what's it's on there.
Cheesy what's it's. Well, I had a category which was party crisps.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what I had presenting party crisps. I think I went for those, what are the little flowery ones? Prawn cocktail. Those? Can't remember the name of them. Ah. But when I got to them, I said, this is part of a whole range of party crisps, which can, you would have an onion rings, cheesy whatsits, the sort of thing that when we were kids, they would pour out into one communal bowl of crisps and you'd mix them
That's
up.
right.
Yeah. So I did mention them. It was a big task and it had to be done properly. So I tried to have them in subgroups, if you see what I mean. But I'm glad that I'm glad that the importance of that video went out into the music world and it's been appreciated.
Yeah.
By fine musicians like yourself.
We were on our way to a gig, sitting in the back of the SUV, watching your content, and which we've been doing more and more often. And we laugh a lot, and we listen to your musical theories and your opinions and everything, and we find it very, very amusing. And we agree with a lot of it. We don't agree with all of it, obviously.
Supposed to.
But my favorite one was when you said top 10 overrated albums. I was very intrigued. I thought, okay, what's he going to do? And then when you put Asia in that list by Steely Dan, I thought, you have my attention. I thought, how's he going to explain this? And the way you explained it kind of made sense. So to answer your question, what drove me to write you? I thought, okay, then I saw the Jim Mullen clip. And of course, I really, really admire this guitar player a lot. And the first time I heard Jim Mullen was when he had a band in the 80s with Morrissey Mullen. Yeah. There was a duo. And it's the first time I heard in UK sort of ground level fusion going on, which wasn't like prog rock, like a Brand X. I always thought of Brand X as a good contender to like Weather Report or something, but it was just a bit more messy and a bit more, all over the shop. Great playing and everything. But Morrissey Mullen, really, I love this band in the 80s. And I used to watch him play. And then I'd go and watch Jim Mullen play at the 606 with whatever lineup he had. In those days, he was playing a Telecaster, a solid body guitar. And he was a really, I remember he was a very, very good rhythm player. That's what really attracted me was his rhythm playing. It's the same as the guy in Average White Band, who also play. I love good rhythm players. That's same as Eddie Van Halen is one of my favorite rhythm players. You know what I mean? Paco de Lucia is my favorite rhythm player. So Jim Mullen is just one of those guitar players. I used to go and watch him play and try and cop the chords he was doing. You know, it's just sort of pointless in a way because what are you going to do with them? You know, but I didn't manage to nick a couple of like 11th chords that he used to do. I'd never heard chords like that before in 83. So
Mm.
playing 11th chord, wow, that's like really interesting. That's what keyboard players do, so he's always stuck with me. And now he's more of a jazz. He's kind of gone into the more the archtop jazz guy, which is fine too. But I think of Jim Mullen as a real kind of Telecaster wielding kind of funk player with, and talking about fusion, really great fusion player. Now I think he's doing more kind of jazz, which is great too. But I really admire Jim Mullen. I put him in the top 10 British guitar players without a
Yeah,
shadow of doubt.
I would too. An incredible career that seems to cover the whole range of sort of British jazz, which is a strange subject. I too discovered him in the 1980s with Morrissey Mullen. I think because in the early 80s there was that sort of British jazz funk explosion. I'm thinking of bands like Shack Attack and Level 42,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people that discovered those bands then found that there was this other band that was almost like the real deal, which was Morrissey
yeah,
Mullen. It was so funky. You've worked with Level 42 in the past, is that right?
yeah. I was in the original lineup. Yeah,
Were you?
yeah. Before they even kind of did when it was we had a rehearsal room at the Guildhall School of Music, and I remember turning up with Mike Lindup on keyboards. Mark was playing bass, which he'd only just started
Oh,
playing because he's a
yeah.
drummer. So he picked up a bass because somebody had to play bass because they were all drummers in that band. Phil Gould and Mike Lindup. But Phil was a great drummer, and we just jammed. And on the third rehearsal, I didn't turn up, and just for one reason or another, I can't even remember why. And that's one of the big kind of decisions in my life that I came to regret, not turning up because then suddenly out of nowhere they signed a deal and it was all happening and everything. I thought, God, I really blew it here. But having said that, if I had stayed with that, I wouldn't have been in the positions that I've ended up with in for decades with another bass player, singer, you know, who's pretty talented. You know what I mean? So sometimes, these things happen for a reason, but I'm still mates with Mark and Mike Lindup. And, because speaking of Level 42, they did have a very good guitar player for a while. When Boone Gould left, Alan Murphy came in, very, very good
What a
player.
player. What an
Because he used
incredible
to play
player.
with Go West. He was one of the first fusion type, like guy who can really play. Like no one had ever seen that in England before, like that American style of, like Gino Vanelli-esque. Who's the guy who played with Gino Vanelli? I can't remember his name.
Well, Daryl
But
Stuermer did it for a while, didn't he?
but anyway, it was that kind of level of intelligent fusion type playing, and but yeah, Level 42 were a good, solid kind of English funk band.
I very influential on me as well, especially like the early tapes and those albums right at the beginning. But then when they crossed over to making, pop music, it still had all the elements of jazz funk fusion, which I loved. And it's really interesting you mention these players because the British jazz fusion scene is a lot more sort of hidden, isn't it? And a lot of those players made a living rather than making their living in, say, a Mahavishnu Orchestra or Weather Report. They made their living in pop bands like Go West or Level 42. There was a lot of players around there that I think are not respected or thought of as much. I go back to Joe Hubbard, the bass player with Morrissey Mullen. I mean, he was a fantastic bass player, wasn't he? And there's
Oh yeah,
so
amazing. The
many
whole
players.
band were great. But actually, the English fusion around that time, the early 80s, there was the Loose Tubes, I think. There was the band, so headed by Django Bates, I think, a
Yeah, that's it.
really incredible piano player. And actually, interestingly enough, I think John Paracelli was in this lineup. And so I thought, wow, this is the best fusion from England that I've heard. Because they had horn arrangements,
Was
they had
incredible.
all kinds of stuff. It was really formidable, you know what I mean? Because for some reason, we've never really had in Britain like a solid modern jazz band that's become international, unless I'm wrong, you know.
I can't think of anything unless you go towards bands that you don't. I mean, I mean, if you thought of something like Jamiroquai, I think that's the evolution of that British jazz funk sound. I think Joel Stevens
Absolutely.
played a great part in it, and Jamiroquai were huge. And again, if you look at the elements in there, it's that type of thing. But I think the British, it's either always very esoteric like Soft Machine, or it's actual pop music, and they've got vocal hooks. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and it's a really interesting scene. Of course, Sting comes out of it, Andy Summers comes out of it, now I'm going to really try and access the deep recesses of my memory. I have a compilation album from the 80s of various jazz fusion groups. I don't know whether you're on it. It had Gary Husband on it. It had the Mondesi brothers. And I'm pretty sure I can't remember. I thought I'd be some. See, you know how my channel works. I try and access the deep rest. What was it called? That one?
What was it, a guitar album?
It might have been. It was.
Guitar Speak.
Yes, I could be. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I did an album for a compilation with Vinnie Colaiuta on drums, and I played bass and guitar, and it might have been that album. But of course, speaking of Gary Husband, I've known him for a while. He's one of my mates and total hero. He's John McLaughlin's MD, for F's sake. You
I
know,
know.
he is to John kind of what I am to Sting. Like he's John's hard drive. So if John wants to access anything from his repertoire, uh, Gary knows it better than John does. I reckon. That might be a stretch,
But
but
it seemed when I'm mentioning these players, it seems that you were actually in the 80s in that sort of British jazz fusion scene yourself. That's
kind of.
right,
Not
that.
really. I sort of became a session player by accident. I didn't try to put myself into that scene, but I did become a session player sort of by accident because I played on so many records that just it culminated into something into bigger names, like Phil Collins, The Pretenders, Level 42. I went into the studio and did stuff with them, but that's because, I had an identity crisis as a guitarist in the 80s because I didn't really know what style I wanted to play. I didn't know who I was. That's why I couldn't get in any really good bands.
What were your
And
sort of early influences on guitar? Um,
sorry?
what were your sort of early influences on guitar? Where would you say you started from as a player?
Well, I mean, like all kids, I mean, it was obviously Hendrix, you know,
Mm.
um, and anything bluesy rock, And then when I was a young teenager, I was really into Robin Trower because I loved the lyricism of his playing, which was just so bluesy and earthy. I loved it. I loved the drumming on that Reggie Isidore, very loose. Uh, I love Robin Trower. I mean, who did I like? I mean, I liked a lot of Brazilian music. I've always been into that gear.
Mm.
Baden Powell, the
Mm.
acoustic guitarist, all that kind of stuff, and of course bossa nova. I have to confess that I love bossa nova. I always did, but I've got I liked. Then I got a bit older. I really liked the good sort of folk guitar players like Burt Yanks,
Oh, it's a
Dick
wide.
Rotten.
You've got um, a wide selection of influences there. I
Oh
can
yeah,
you mean by
yeah.
an
So
identity
that was the
crisis.
problem. That was the problem, Andy. I couldn't really decide on which direction I wanted to go. I love classical guitar, Julian Bream. So I really kind of got into that. Did a deep dive on classical guitar just to understand it and to learn those pieces, in the grading system. I had some formal education, with different teachers and music college, and that's what I sort of did, that sort of academic side of it, got really into it. But then I just fell into the in and out of studio scene by accident, where people would just call me up because I was the guy you called when you weren't really sure what to do as a producer. So see if he can come up with something, plus what's already there. So I could play just about anything, just about any style, but none of it was authentic. None of the styles were authentic because I wasn't a specialist in fusion or country or funk or jazz or Latin American music. I just was never that specialist in any of them. That's what made it possible for me to be a studio musician. So it made sense with a producer having someone who is kind of like an actor, a character.
Yeah, I mean, you watch those interviews.
And just play a role. So I could do fake country, I could do fake funk, I could do fake everything. That's why working with with the producers, Hugh Padgham and many other producers would call me, say, play on this record, whoever. And sometimes there were huge records, and that culminated in the meeting with Sting, which was the perfect home for my type of guitar playing or my musicianship, because it was exactly what I imagined, hoped it would be, which is just like playing roles. And if Sting suddenly says, "Oh, can you just play like a country vibe on that, and then a bossa nova, and then a fusion, something in 11/8," that's not a problem for me because I grew up listening to all that stuff. So there's no genre that will really kind of flummox me. You know what I mean? So I really enjoy working with him because I get to play these different roles, and it's sort of tongue in cheek. None of it is deadly serious. Sometimes I'll do gigs, let's say in Spain, and we're doing a rock song, and there might be a rock guitarist in the audience going, that ain't it, mate. Or I might be doing a jazz thing, and there'll be a jazz guy going, nah, that's not it. But I say to them, well, if you're sitting with Sting and he suddenly wants you to play some country, which I don't particularly like, what would you do? That they go, well, I don't do that. Well, then I'm going, well, that's the point. So through Sting, I learned a way of playing guitar that just kind of is quite broad, and none of it is really kind of specialist. It's not a specialist way of playing.
I have come to think, doing the channel and really thinking about music, that authenticity is overrated. It's not a great thing at all. And all the stuff we love is by musicians who are trying to do something else, or maybe doing two different styles at the same time. And I mean, if you look at, heavy metal rock guitar player, and that's Tony Iommi. The guy's got no fingers and he's a Django Reinhardt fan. And somehow that all comes together in what we now know as heavy metal guitar playing. And I think I do think authenticity is overrated. I think players that are much more wider in their focus and want to bring everything in, that's the real deal. I remember
Absolutely.
the album is that I think you're on. When I first came across you, because I've got quite an encyclopedic knowledge, and I in the 80s I bought a compilation album of British jazz fusion called A Certain Kind of Freedom.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
No, not really.
Okay, I'll dig it out, and if you watch the channel, I'll see whether you're on it. I'm pretty sure, because I'm a bit nerdy on things. I'm pretty sure you're on that one on something.
I'm probably on it. I don't know how many albums I've played on, but quite a lot. But actually, John McLaughlin was a huge influence as well, because what I liked about his playing is that it's very, very musical for a start. It's mostly his like, again, his rhythm playing, his arpeggiating. And as you noticed in the email that you wrote back to me, that you copped, not a lot of people have, that is one of my influences inside of Sting's music, is that.
Your sound's gone, Dominic. Oh, that was getting exciting then.
So John's that type of the way he would pick arpeggios and the type of chords he was using, which were like very pianistic type of chords. No one plays that chord vocabulary like John does. And his funk playing, all his shredding and stuff great. I don't really understand it. You know, when Mahavishnu kind of went wild and stuff, they kind of lost me a bit, but it's the way that they would start a tune, the opening riffs to a tune, don don dan don don dan, like thank you, that sort of thing, and then when he did a couple of solo albums, like Electric Dreams, that playing, I mean, oh God, those tunes are just insane. A lot of arpeggio playing. So I brought that into Sting's music quite a lot, actually. Um,
I love to hear this, that there's this sort of esoteric thing, and you think where John McLaughlin gets it from. And then so there's certain musicians that we all know, and the way that bubbles its way through and then ends up on absolutely huge tracks. Could you say some of the Sting tracks you've been involved with, writing, that where you could say that influence is there?
yeah, well, actually, the most known song is probably Shape of My Heart, is those type of chords. Those are totally John chords. There's no way around it. Those are John chords. It's playing sixth chords, sixths,
Mm.
and up and down the neck. So I thought, I'm going to have a go at that. And I was just messing around with that type of motif. There's a song on, it's a direct influence off a song on Electric Dreams called Miles Davis, I think, which is dun dun ding, dun dun ding. It's these wide arpeggios with sixth chords. Dun, 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 dun. Beautiful melody as well. So those kind of chords up and down the neck are exactly what I was trying to do with Shape. I wasn't even trying to write a song, but I came up with my own motif based around those chords. So that's a very good example. And there's some deeper cuts of St. Augustine Burns in Hell, which is of Ten Sumner's Tales, which is in 7/8, I think. And I'm going out full on John type
Yeah,
arpeggiating with
that's where I feel. I mean, that album I lived by for a number of years, being a huge Dave Sanchez fan, being a huge Vinnie Colaiuta fan, being a huge
yeah,
Sting fan, and because it came out with the video of you in what looks like Sting's living room. I assumed it was his living
yeah,
room,
that's right.
all played together, and I just used to
Yeah.
watch that over and over again. And I'm as I'm doing this interview, I don't want to focus on talking about two of my heroes, which is Vinnie Colaiuta, who is like basically like that, and also John McLaughlin, because were you on the sessions that Sting did with John McLaughlin, the Wind Cries
Mhm.
Mary sessions? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I felt on that John McLaughlin went back to a style of playing, this sort of brutal way of playing on that. He's off
Yeah,
the charts,
it was
Vinnie
crazy.
backing him up and Sting on bass and singing. And then there's this beautiful guitar playing, and when I heard it, I thought that's not John McLaughlin. And that
No, I mean, no, what happened there is Sting just had John coming round for lunch or something. There was no idea to do anything because they're sort of mates. Well, he must have been in the area, and then he called me up and said, "John, we want to do Wind Cries Mary, but John is playing it too staccato. Can you come in and do the sort of Hendrixy,
yeah,
the Luther Stratty
yeah.
thing, so John can have a blow?" And I went, "Oh hell yeah, of course I'll be there right away." No disrespect to John, but that's not what he was cut out to do, is
No.
that sort of loose, stratty type playing. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So once again, put my, character, hat on, and I'm going to try and do something stratty and Hendrixy with that loose type of playing. So I just showed up and I just did that. And we're jamming along and John's playing and they're thinking, God almighty, apart from being starstruck, because, he's one of the few people that I get starstruck with. I don't get starstruck that easily, but with John, I always end up speaking in Polish or in a language I've never heard. You know what I mean? Asking him questions. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I must have made a fool of myself. But I remember sitting down with him when we had a lunch break, and I told him what a fan I was, without trying to embarrass him or myself. And I told him, I love that your version of My Foolish Heart
Oh,
on Electric Guitarist.
beautiful.
It's a beautiful kind of solo guitar arrangement. I thought this is just stunning. And I was asking him about his chord language. How does he think like that. And then I was talking about a tune that I really like, a bossa nova tune called Desafinado by Antonio Carlos Jobim, which is quite a complex tune. And desafinado literally means out of tune. That's why the melody is sort of awkward, but genius. So I said to John, would you be able to do that sort of chord language with this standard? And he went, yeah. So he sat there and in front of me, improvised, like right next to me, improvised some chords around that tune. And I just thought, this guy is just insane. This to me is what real musicianship is. Forget the shredding and everything. We all know he can shred his ass off. You know, it's like, but that's never really impressed me that much. With some people, it impresses me, you know, like, wow, that's like some serious picking going on there, you know, like that's virtuosity. I'm all for virtuosity. But John, to me, what I relate to John is more his writing and his musical brain. That's why Gary is in the right place in the John realm, because Gary understands what's happening harmonically with John. And he has, like Sting does, he has his own musical dialect. It's an accent that nobody else has. Whereas if you put hundreds of other guitar players who are all genius players, they don't have their own dialect. It sort of comes from a big American mosh pit of fusion. But there's certain players like John who have that. You know, talking about influences, when I was a kid growing up, I really liked Gong and Steve Hillage. That sort of bluesy, trippy kind of, but very, very virtuosic style of playing. Intelligent, but not too intellectual. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And what about
We're going to
what
come
about
to
the
one
gong
of
with
your.
Alan Holdsworth?
The obligatory mention of Alan Holdsworth.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Okay, I'm prepared for this discussion.
Yeah, because the guy that seems to hover over the whole of British jazz fusion and guitar players is Alan Holdsworth, and I find it's very difficult to find a musician who knows what they're talking about that doesn't, you know, appreciate Alan Holdsworth in some way, and yet to the general public, he's not very known. I mean, was he an influence on you at all?
Well, actually, no, he wasn't, because I always thought, okay, here's this guy, Alan Holdsworth. Actually, Gary Husband used to be in his trio a long, long time ago, where Paul Carmichael was playing bass, mate of mine. Vinny Colaiuta, who's my mate, he goes on about Holdsworth, and he's just like, he's really into it, like you are. And I know you are, because you can't help mentioning him in just about every one
No,
of
I was
your
trying not to.
Sure. But
And I thought I could get Alan Holdsworth in on that call. And I've been trying not to the whole time. Even when you mentioned level 42, I sat there like a good boy, didn't I? I never mentioned Alan Holdsworth.
well, he was in the band.
I know.
He was totally out of place in that band. That's because Mark King is a total fan as well. But it's like, what's Alan Holdsworth doing in level 4? Poor guy was standing up there, like, what's he going to do? But anyway, I mean, Alan Holdsworth is fantastic. But I don't really understand a lot of what he's doing. That's what really got me. It's like, to me, this genius level playing, especially the chords. I mean, the chords. What are these chords? Can you stop for a second? He has that thing that Joe Zawinul has. It's like he can play 3 notes. And while I'm trying to figure out what those 3 notes are, based on the root note, you know, I might be on a bus or something. What are down, down, down? What are these 3 notes? And I'm like, I can't figure it out. He's already on to something else.
Yeah.
And so I feel intellectually challenged, and I just and then of course when he's playing solos and stuff and he's going up and down the neck, it sounds like sort of Coltrane, but next level. It's just so genius level that I don't know what he's doing, and I don't feel that I could do it. You know, when I hear Steve Hillage or Jeff Beck,
Yeah.
I sort of think I could probably do that, but there's nothing that Holdsworth does that I think I'm up to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, did you ever hear the quote John McLaughlin said about Alan Holdsworth, which was something like, I'd steal what you were doing if I knew what the hell you were doing." That's John McLaughlin. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. A huge influence on me as a player coming up after watching the Zildjian Day in New York, which was brought out on video in 1985, was Vinnie Colaiuta. I also think he's possibly the greatest drummer alive on the planet at the moment. He's what do I ask? What's he like to work with? What's he like as a
Oh, I
person?
mean, I spent a long, long time with him, and we became very close. And I just had lunch with him last week, actually, because he's sort of living outside of Los Angeles now. He's moved out of town, and he's sort of not as present as he was a few years ago when he was in Herbie's band and Jeff Beck's band and everything. He kind of went off the map a little bit. But Vinny is a huge influence on me. His practice method and well, for instance, the way he practices influenced the way that I practice. For instance, he would just before a show, he'd be in the dressing room and he would literally, not with a drum pad, but with a pillow or whatever was around on a sofa edge, he would just go, and then this would go on for 10 minutes, just that. And then I would say, "Vinny, what are you doing? Is that practicing?" And he'd go, "I need to feel every part of the motion, which starts from my lower back, it goes up my back, it goes to my shoulder, it goes to here, and it goes to the tip of the stick. And I need every note, every beat to deserve to be struck." And it's real deep stuff. So I started doing that with guitar. So that's my practice method, is to practice hyper slowly. And
Something.
this is huge. But of course, he would do this for a while, and then he'd start doing some more rudiments. Okay, getting a bit more complicated. And then, of course, he can polyrhythm his ass off for all night because of the Zappa stuff. You know what he's like. And then leading up to the show, there'll be 15,000 people out there. He'll suddenly just be against the wall and whereas on side of stage, and he'll be on a flight case or something and just doing some shit that I don't understand. It's like Holdsworth-esque,
Like Holdsworth, on drums.
Like nobody knows what he's doing. And it is all polyrhythmic. And
I've got to say, when you were saying that, my hair stood on end right up here because I have just followed Vinny for about 40 years, and when I interviewed Scott Henderson, he started to tell me certain things, and you just have that feeling of, oh my God, I should be paying for this. This is a lesson, and what you just said there, and it's so simple that someone at Vinny Colaiuta's level is basically not concentrating on the detail. They start with really going into detail on the most simplest of things. And when COVID happened, and I was stuck here, I started practicing a lot more. And as I was practicing, I kept finding faults in my playing, and so I thought I've got to get that sorted out. And I noticed I was getting simpler and simpler. And towards the end of that stuck at home time, I basically had a metronome on 20 BPM and I was playing whole notes, literally just striking it, focusing on trying to do that. And I thought, oh, this is just silly what you're doing, Andy. You need to get back to do some proper practice with. So when you said that was like very powerful for me
Well, that's the best thing that you could be doing, though, and it's true. And I'll never forget that. Is that method of practice is to do it slowly, just be in control of the instrument, as opposed to the instrument being in control of you. It's like riding a horse. You have to be the boss of what you're doing. That's why every time you hear any hi-hat beat or snare or tom-tom or crash, you can be 100% sure that it's fully it comes with intention and integrity.
Yeah.
Every strike that he his snare sound.
Oh, it's
His tom sound, his kick sound. It's all from
It's
practice.
him.
He practices a lot. So he's one of my big influences in practice, but so is Jason Rebello. And the reason why I say Jason is because another great British jazz musician is because he told me something that really stuck. He said, when you practice, if it sounds musical, you're doing it wrong. I think, what? What do you mean by that? Well, what he's talking about is trying to practice with zero dynamics. So as a drummer, you could apply that. And as a guitarist, I certainly apply that. So practice a piece, let's say a Bach passage or whatever it is that you want, or like a Coltrane sequence or whatever, but practice it with no dynamics. And it's really difficult to do. And to practice slowly with no dynamics, like metronomic, so that every note has equal value, is one of the hardest things to do. But if you can do that, you're kind of qualified to play music. Because it's too easy to practice fast and to practice eloquently and musically. But to practice unmusically and flat and in control is a whole nother level. So what he's saying is that if you do it musically, you're not practicing, you're playing music. There's a huge distinction there. And so I apply these principles to what I do, and I think that every musician should try it at least, is put yourself in that zone. We're not playing music here, we're practicing to be a better musician when we play in front of people, or in a studio, or on a gig, or even to your dog.
Because practice is, you've said something there that is really enlightening for me. Practice is about principles, isn't it? Rather than just sitting down and playing, you have to think, what am I trying to do here? And once you have a principle, like I'm not playing music, what I'm doing is I'm taking everything out of it, all the expression, everything out of it, and just playing it through completely dry.
Exactly.
It's a blank canvas, which then, once I've got that locked properly, I can then bring access. Because I started off as a painter, you see, and I can remember when I was at art college painting, and we had a famous painter come round, and he came and he was watching me paint it, and he, when somebody says something and it stays with you for like 45 years, and this guy looked at me and he said, every brush mark you should approach like a squirrel jumping from branch to branch. He said that squirrel, if there's any tension, if there's any thought, they could fall to their death. He says every brush mark you should approach as though it's a matter of life and death, but you have to execute it completely relaxed. And it stuck in my head.
No, but another thing that Vinny, that's really remarkable about Vinny, is that whenever you play with him, and this is another thing I learned from him, is whenever you're in the room and you're playing with him, you sound better. And then you sort of think, why is it that every time I play with Vinny, I play better than when I play with anyone else? And the answer is because he's making it happen.
And listening.
Why? Because he's listening.
Yeah, listening.
Hello. So he's a very generous musician. And this all comes from the highest elite philosophy of jazz, which is to listen and to be aware of what's around you and compliment the people around you. See, if everybody can do that, this is the Miles philosophy. Miles is listening, and he's making everyone play at their optimum level. They don't understand why they sound better, but they do. That's because Miles makes it happen. Vinny is one of these musicians. So when we play with Vinny, Sting plays the bass better, his timing is better, he's singing better, he's happier. I'm like, I sound amazing. I can't believe I'm standing right next to him. I've lost some of my hearing in my left side because of Vinny's drums for 15 years. But that's what elite musicians do, is they listen. It doesn't sound, it sounds very simple there. And if I were to talk to a music student about that, they go, yeah, all right, I know what you mean. Yeah, cool. But no, that's really it. You just got to, I wish I'd done it sooner. So when I'm
And
working,
it's hard to do. It's hard
when
to
we're
keep
playing a
that.
song with Sting, for instance, like 7 days, which is a lot of drummers seem to identify with that song for some reason. To me, it's just another song. Who cares whether it's in 5 or in 7 or I don't even know what it's.
It's in 5.
Because it's in an odd time signature, it doesn't mean it's good. You know, it's just to me, it just sounds like 4/4. You know, because Vinny makes everything sound easy. But I remember there were times when he would do a deep fill in the middle. He'd go onto one of his very deep. Probably we made it a longer fill live. It was probably 4 bars, and Sting and I, which we just didn't know where we were going to come back in. We were just like, are we tapping our feet? Are we counting here? Or, but so Sting would just like, okay, he'd go do this big fill, and then Sting would just come in, go, fuck this, I'm coming in now. And but Vinny would make it sound like he came in the right place. That's what we're talking about, because he's listening.
You know the concerts you watch with Jim Mullen. I was very proud because my daughter, who's 15, got up and sang at the end.
Oh, great.
And when we turned up, my daughter said, "Oh, because she just is really into her singing, and she heard Jim and she recognised how great he was." She goes, "Oh, I wish I could do a song with him." So I turned around and said, "Jim, would you like to do a song with my daughter?" And he went, "Yeah, what songs do you know?" And my daughter went, "I know Lately by Stevie Wonder." And Jim was like, "Oh, I don't really know that." And then the keyboard player, she sang it to him, and he said, "Oh, I think I basically knew it." And what you watch when we play that one is Jim playing that song on the spot. He just pulled it out of the air. But the thing is, he just took my daughter and just listened, and he's supporting her all the way through. And on that gig I was playing, I was thinking, you get stressed out playing with a player like this at this level. You know, you want to respect them, but actually they pull the music out of you. You know, they actually pull it out of you, and he just looked after
Exactly
my
what they do.
daughter
Yeah,
because music is made out of love. I've said this is
yeah,
the most fundamental conclusion of my channel is that music's made out of love, and I think I love it so much, you love it so much, and then we find we're talking about it, and you've made contact with me, and people will see you, and I
absolutely.
what I think what's communicating here and what it is, it's this love of people, of their characters, of their generosity, of being together. That's
Mm,
what it's the togetherness, isn't it, that you feel it's
totally.
incredible.
You
You
know,
know,
that's why, you know, when I was younger in this industry, I was probably more ambitious and I was in it for myself. That's why it sort of clicked for me from one day to the next that it's not about that, mate. Nobody really cares about you.
no, they
They,
don't.
what they care about is what you bring to, it's not about you. So every young player, you know, it's typical with young musicians, especially in the instrumental scene, you know, jazz scene, is to play really cool solos and just, you know, like really impress. But at the end of the day, nobody really, that's not what this is about. There's a time and a place for that. I remember when I was doing the Phil Collins session, I woke up and I realized, oh God, this is, how did I not know this before? But it's just about playing what's required, nothing more. That's why Christian McBride, Wayne Shorter, John McLaughlin, you know, all these people, when they played, it's just a joyous experience when you play with them. It's like, must be the same in the sports world with football players. If you're suddenly on the pitch with these amazing players, of course you're going to perform better and rise to it, you know? But anyway,
So
I've been very lucky, Andy, to work with some great drummers. I mean, huge
yeah,
list. Well, Manu Katché, who was with Sting when I joined him,
mm,
and Manu and Vinny are two great drummers who are very, very different.
mm.
You know, I could go on about it for hours, but you know, he was a great player. We worked with Keith Carlock, a different type of player, much more the American style laying back on the groove, which didn't probably work so well with Sting because Sting likes the drummer to be on top, but not too on top. It's a tightrope, you know, because he's on top of the beat in an English way. American players don't really do that. And he doesn't want the drummer to kind of catch up with him too much, but he's like, you got to pull him back. It's a tension. And Keith was too far back,
Oh
He
God,
was
yeah,
too cool for it. Steely Dan cool.
yeah, yeah.
And we worked with Abe Laboriel, we've worked with Josh Freese, uh, a lot of great players, Omar, I've done
Sting,
sessions.
Sting chooses drummers. It seems they're so disparate in their approaches. So he's like a proper songwriter. He's always looking, I suppose, for that new thing that can infuse him with something else. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. He wants to be surprised. He wants to be kind of provoked, I suppose. As a band leader, that's kind of what a good band leader should be, and he is to get your musicians in a place where you rein them in, as opposed to trying to push them out, which is kind of the Miles approach, actually. So surprise the music, surprise the band leader, make a mistake, get the death stare. The death stare is good because it means that you're being noticed. But if you play safe and try to play like really on the grid, that's not very interesting in that world of jazz. That's why, whoever played in the Miles band, when all these people have gone on to greatness in their own way,
Mm.
like and like McLaughlin and, the Mike Stern, all these people, and all percussionists, drummers, it's like there's a huge academy of Miles. He has that effect on musicians, and they have one thing in common, and that is the listening thing. I mean, we're going around in circles now, but I feel very, very lucky to have worked with people like this. An English guy,
Mm.
which I'm sort of English, but to be working at that level has been a real, real gift, and I've learned so much. It's such a privilege to have been around this kind of musicianship.
I think it's incredible. But you
You know,
yourself,
and so
for you to have survived in it for this long,
yeah,
and
35 years thing, and that's partly because we write together as well, and I come in with motifs and ideas, and I think my favorite guitarists are usually guitarists who write good stuff, like John McLaughlin. You know, not a lot of and Pat Metheny is another one. He writes really good stuff.
yeah,
They're tunes, man. There's so many good players who can interpret. And not just guitar players, but drummers, saxophone players, keyboard players, but who can write music? Because that tells me a lot about who you are as a musician. And I've got a little list here I wrote down of my, of course, of my guitar players that I like. Because then there's all the guitar players in the rock realm that we haven't discussed, and the fusion realm, and the prog realm as well. But I just think that the best ones are the ones who write really good stuff. I mean, like Eric Clapton wrote some great tunes. Not a shredder by any stretch, but
I think Clapton's massively underrated, massively underrated.
yeah,
And I think people don't. I was doing it when I set up my channel. I was going, well, what's he do? Blah blah blah. But then you start to see that basically that Beano album he made with John Mayall, that is rock
yeah.
guitar playing. He invented it. Nobody else did. It's he and
And
then on he's journeyed all the way through so many different places, ending up as a very great singer-songwriter. And there's some brilliant songs there. But I think the
yeah,
guitar lot can't quite cope with it. I'd supported him once on a gig, and I went and listened to him play. I put my ear up against his amp. I could literally get right next to him, and I listened to him play, and I thought, "Oh my God, the virtuosity! He never goes
yeah.
wrong.
He
Never
can play a
goes
blues
wrong."
solo and make it go on forever, like BB King could, and
Yeah,
it never gets old.
and
Like
and
if you give me a two chorus run over a song, I'll run out of things to say because I'm not that good of a player like he is. But that's because I'm using up my whole kind of repertoire of feelings, and I'll just have to say I'm done, mate. But these players, they can just go on forever.
well, I spoke to him very very short time, but you just felt this huge melancholy, and a lot of angst in him. And so when he started to play, he seemed to have this vast reservoir that he could just pull on, you know, and I don't think that gets people don't respect that anymore. The idea of Clapton's a virtuoso because of the emotional hit.
So the real virtuoso in England, I think, is Richie Blackmore. You know, he was, if you really want to get down to it, you know, if I was offered the Pepsi challenge of Zeppelin or Deep Purple, I'd have to go with Deep Purple. I mean, as much as I love Zeppelin and Jimmy Page, I adore all those riffs and everything, but Richie Blackmore was a beast on the
He
guitar.
was, yeah, totally.
And nobody ever played. If you kind of equate it to kind of world championship heavyweight boxing, there's our contender for the Americans, is Richie Blackmore. And of course, Jeff Beck as well, you know.
Yeah, those two.
And I mean, nobody knows how Jeff Beck came up with what he came up with, but, you know, we could go on for a while about that. But yeah, great player. And I actually have a story with Jeff Beck because he wanted me to write some tunes for him because he doesn't write his tunes. So I had lunch with him, and he said, "Look, I need some tunes," because he always has other people write his tunes for him. You know, like Tony Hymas, the keyboard player, and you know, other people. Jason Rebella wrote some tunes for him, and so he wanted me to write some tunes. So we got together, and I'm hanging out, having lunch with Jeff Beck, and I'm thinking, this is Jeff Beck. Such a cool guy, you know, he's the total rock star, strat wielding jazz. He's got the fusion, he's got the jazz, he's a rock star, he looks cool. He stands with his legs apart when he plays that really intricate stuff. He's got a good barnet, whether it's his or not, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't
You know what I
matter.
mean?
Doesn't matter.
But what a great
Same with Richie
example.
Blackmore. I doubt the barnet with Richie Blackmore, but does it matter?
No, he's got a dodgy hat, that's for sure. No, I don't know what happened to them, to Deep Purple, but all I do know is my favorite live album is for sure is Made in Japan. I listened to that stuff when I was 15. Because when I was 15, you know, all this stuff was coming out. I was 16 when Heavy Weather came out. I go into a record shop. I had £5 to invest. That's all I got of pocket money, right? I spent whatever money I had, I spent it on albums. And so what am I going to buy this time? So I'd go in and you listen to Heavy Weather. I'm thinking, this can't be real. This is supernatural, whatever it is. And same with Hendrix. Same with, you know, like certain, when I heard Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I just thought, I'm buying that. How much is it? You know, if I listen to Tarkus now, it probably doesn't have the same effect, but it will remind me what it was like to be 15 and to listen to that side one. What is that? You know, but some of these albums, they were just supernatural. But this was happening when I was 15 and 16. These albums were actually coming out. So I was an adolescent in the mid-70s. And I thought, this is really good music happening at the moment. But what I didn't know 30 years later is, yeah, it was really good music. People are still listening to that time period and what happened with jazz and fusion towards the end of the 70s, and then how it just like, you know, after Weather Report, and then it just amazing. Mahavishnu and Weather Report, the first two bands that became rock stars, you know, and
Return to Forever.
I saw your interview with Aldo Meola as well,
yeah.
And you know his contribution too, you know, Return to Forever. I mean, Stanley Clarke, all that stuff is like, wow. To be a 15-year-old listening to that, that's why I'm in music.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. I thought, this is what I'm doing now.
Well, I
was a little bit. I got my parents to get me to Berkeley.
Yeah.
I did a summer course in Berkeley. I'm going to Berkeley, and I haven't looked back since. It's just like, you know, it's just been downhill from there. I've never had a life since then.
Yeah.
Except in music.
It's incredible. For me, it was 1980. It was two albums that made me why I'm talking to you now. The first was Ace of Spades by Motorhead, And the second,
Really?
yeah, but I just, when I heard that, it did something visceral to me. And the other one was Regarded to Blanc by the Police. Both power trios, both with a singing bass player. I've always seen Lemmy as the anti-Sting. Does that make sense?
Lemmy,
Yeah, Lemmy's
anti-Sting.
the anti-Sting. They
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
they're yin and yang. They because it was those are my two things starting off.
because he was in Hawkwind, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in Hawkwind. Yeah,
It was a prog band.
yeah, that was yeah. And so they both seem to be coming out of somehow out of progressive rock. And so I just started playing the drums. My dad said, "Have you heard this band, The Police? You've got to hear this." And he said, "You should have a listen to the drummer," because my dad was a drummer. I bought Regatta de Blanc, and of course, at 11, 12 years old, I'm trying to learn to play those drum beats. And of course, if you do it at that age, I just wouldn't be here if I hadn't learned Stuart Copeland's drum beats. Many years later, I earned my living in two different Police tribute bands touring around playing that song. So it's been Sting's songs have been close to me, not to use that as a pun, you know, but it's next to you. He did. I'm thinking of the Carpenters.
Close.
Yeah, but nearly got it right. So I've had this thing of going back to the Sting songs, and when we got the tribute band together, we learnt it all note for note, and I got a shot of all Stuart's drum, and we were playing it, and it wasn't right. And our singer, the great Simon Blight, who is Sting in the band, we sat there and said, "Why is that?" And he said, "I think it's because the Police jam." And so we went to the live shows, and we suddenly found that they were like a jazz fusion band. It's like nothing was set; it was like, you know, and so we started to play like that. Is that true? Actually, playing with Sting, is there that latitude
yeah.
in his songs?
He loves jamming. Oh, for sure. Yeah, and he, as a guitar player, he encourages me to just go out of the box all the time. And I mean, you're kind of innocent till proven guilty in his band. You know what I mean? Just anything goes. But there is a structure. He's
Yeah.
also he used to be a school teacher, so there is this structure, this ordered format. He's quite old-fashioned in a way. We're sticking. This is the song, so you got to be faithful to the song. Everybody should think about that. When you're playing a song, the song is the boss more than the artist, because
They have to be
it's
good
out of the
songs,
artist's
don't they?
hands. You
They
know,
have to be a good song.
it's a living organism, a song, and it's out of the artist's hands. But so the artist has got the job of carrying it, but your job is to make the song sound good. I mean, yeah, I mean, he's a really interesting person to work with, you know, Sting, you know, and he's just got this kind of ability to come up with 2 or 3 chord changes that I've never heard before. And so my job is just to figure out all the best options around that idea. And that's what Stewart did. So Sting would have a motif or an idea, and Stewart articulated it in such a way that it would open Sting's imagination. Not to mention Andy Summers, who possibly if you can call him an underrated guitarist, because he was never a guitar hero.
No.
You know, but that's what made him a hero. I remember I took notice of him because those suspended chords, that wide, the spaces, the attack, that very bright Telecaster rhythm sound, very staccato way of playing. I'd never heard that before. Of course, using a few pedals and gizmos, but that was fashionable in those days. It doesn't really matter, you know. Actually, I saw Stuart Copeland play because I used to go to the Guildford Civic when I was a kid, where I used to live. Whoever was playing there, I'd go and see, like Gong.
Mm.
I saw Argent, I saw Bebop Deluxe, but I saw Curved Air. And that was with Stuart Copeland. But the guitar player, I have no idea who it was the first time I ever heard a 9th chord, like a jingak. What? What is that? It's that one. And I'd never heard that before. In UK, I'd heard it on Stevie Wonder records, you know, but anyway, so Andy, back to Andy. So I'm on a rant now. But Andy's a hugely influential guitarist, not only to me, but to a lot of people. And it's the way he uses space. Thank you. All the space, not articulating bass notes on the, you don't have to play all the notes in the chord. You got a bass player and learning, and that's why then we have to mention Larry Carlton as well, you know. So like talk about people who don't play everything. They just play. The less you play, the more it's heard and the more value it has in a way. It has more
A lot of those
currency.
blues
It has
songs,
more currency.
the meat of the chords is stripped out. So if he's playing a ninth as he does on, you know, Every Breath You Take or Message in a Bottle, and it's voiced 1, 5, and then 9. There's no third there, and also the second is an octave away.
Yeah.
And it's very much like Joni Mitchell. When you listen to Joni Mitchell's tracks, it's all suspended chords.
Oh
And
yeah.
she never liked bass players who played the root. She wanted Jacko to weave through, which then unsettles the harmony, doesn't it? And it makes the song, it's not rooted. There's a suspense, literally a suspense. And I feel that's
Yeah.
in Sting's songs. So I've not always, but very often you're not too sure, and that's might be what
There's an ambiguity to it.
there's an ambiguity to there. It's the only way it can exist is as a whole. You need the melody there, and then you don't get Every Breath You Take unless you've got the vocal melody, because there's no thirds. We don't know whether these are major or minor.
It's very interesting though. It's definitely a dialect. It's a musical dialect, like we were talking about with John, who has that. It's an accent. It's like nobody speaks like that. And Sting's harmonic vocabulary is really important. That's why people who come into this band, I've seen people come and go over the last 35 years. Many people come and go. The ones who go, who come and but don't stay for very long, are the ones that never really understood the language, the accent. And that's particularly, that usually happens with backing vocalists or keyboard players who don't understand that you've got to not play that note and that one. And Sting has a musical dialect that sometimes it's a fourth below, or it's like as you say, no second. There's ninths or a lot of suspension, ambiguity. Let the melody carry this. Don't play the root. So you just find eventually I found a way of playing. You know, I understand it, but not a lot of keyboard players have their go-to way of playing a chord sequence. This is how I play in the A minor ninth. Every time it works with everybody else I played, it sounds great, you know, and that's how I play an 11th chord. It's like that, you know, okay. But does it work for Sting's music? And he's very, very sensitive to who understands his music. Same with drummers. And with drummers, it's who understands when to rush and when to be on top and when to pull back and when to not play a fill. He hates fills. You know, one of the hardest songs for a drummer to play in the Sting world is Every Breath You Take. That's the one that they all struggle with.
The only thing that used to work for me in the tribute band was no hi-hat, and I had to go boom, bat, boom, boom, just like that with just the bass drum and snare. Couldn't even play a hi-hat in it. As soon as you put a hi-hat, but then if you played the snare drum, you couldn't flam it. So you almost would just have one hand, boom, bat, but I thought, is this it? You know, I know exactly what you mean. And going back to his chord progressions, one of my favorite Sting songs is Fortress Around, you know.
Oh yeah, that's really,
and the harmony's insane.
Yeah.
But sometimes he has this ability to sort of take jazz harmony, but evoke almost like Chaucer. It's almost like medieval England. These two things are in there, and I feel like I'm on it's like what did Chaucer write? You know, when they go to Canterbury Tale. It feels like you're traveling through, especially Fortress. You're traveling through different landscapes which relate to this sort of, I call it the English aesthetic. I'm sure you've known I've mentioned this the whole time. And Sting's got this in bucket loads, this English aesthetic thing. And so that must be a very difficult thing for musicians, especially when you're drawing on the sort of American jazz type.
Yeah, they don't understand that. And it actually comes from a folk culture. It comes from the Northumberland sort of culture, which has bits of Scottish in it. Well, yeah, I mean, it does come from that. Yeah, he has a sort of, I see what you mean by the also the Henry Purcell approach to kind of chords, the kind of linear type was using a lot of fourths.
Fourths and in an emotion together. So they, yeah. But I actually,
You know, the genius of that song, the genius of that song is how it transposes down a semitone. Who goes down a semitone? You know, you can go up a semitone, go do the Barry Manilow up a semitone, it always works, or up a full step or a tone, as the English would say. But he somehow manages to transpose it down a semitone. That's just insane. I still don't understand how that works. And we struggle with that song. We play that one live. We have a current band, and that's part of our set. And we still struggle with it. And, like how I struggle with how it makes sense. I don't know how it makes sense.
You know why I think it makes sense is because when you listen to that song, it's as though there is a character traveling towards a castle, and he's journeying towards this castle that he's trying to access. It's a very ancient sort of story.
Love
When
it.
he does that semitone drop, I feel like the journey has dropped down. We're going through this forest, we're coming out, and then we get to this fortress. And then when you get to the fortress, it's locked and you can't get in. And I think I can remember I did a clinic tour with the great Kenny Aranoff, who the great session player, and I said to him, I said, "Have you got any advice for me as a session player?" Which I'm not really a session player, but and he turned around and he said, "Yeah," he said, he went, think that you've just got the part in a movie, and you're a character actor." He said, think that the main person is the film star, the song is the script, the producer's a director. And he said, so when you get in, the first thing you should be doing is trying to work out what this song's about. I said, what do you mean? He said, get the lyrics. Because I think what it is that Sting writes in a way where it's the lyrics that make sense of that semitone drop, perhaps. I don't know. I mean,
No, I
you're
think
the
that you make a
expert, not
good
me.
point there. You make a very good point because I mean, I joke with Sting quite often that I don't know what he's on about. And we laugh about that. But actually, truth be told, sometimes I do sit there. I might be on a plane and I'm listening to a song because we need to learn it for sound check or something, a song we haven't done for a while. So I'm listening and I'm actually, okay, what is he on about? And he's a great lyricist because there's a lot of ambiguity to it. It's not what he's singing about is not necessarily what you might think it is. It's what you want it to be. And that's what a great lyricist is. And as you say, if the lyrics can somehow correlate with the harmonic structure the way it does with Fortress, well, then you're onto a winner. That's why he's one of the great lyricists,
So
I think.
how does something like Shape of Your Heart? So you've got this guitar part, and
Yeah,
then he takes that and he turns it, and he gets this idea of almost like is it like a pack of cards? Is that the one? He's
yeah,
with a different pack of cards, and it seems to suggest the tarot, and there's this esoteric meaning, and he gets all that in, and you feel that there's this shape being drawn. I felt he seems to. Sting has always sculpted it's these storylines and traveling and I mean Joni Mitchell's the only other one I know that can do this is that they travel you travel
yeah.
it's like I
Paul
love you
Simon is another. Paul Simon can do that. He
yeah
can take his lyrics and music seem to work really well together.
yeah
Genius.
that's it that you've got you could do a song where you got there's the childhood there's the adolescence and there's the grown up bit all in
Yeah.
3 minutes or time scales or vast spaces there's my favorite songs lyrically have that quality of traveling. I'm a huge. I mean, in terms of Sting, I think his songwriting's incredible. I think I think he's underrated as a songwriter. I don't know why he's not put in the same
Yeah,
bracket.
well, it's that whole nomadic thing. That's why the romantic idea of a musician being a traveler. I like that. That's what I am. That's my job. I'm on the road 10 months a year, and it's been like that for decades. And there's a romanticism around being a traveling, almost vagabond in a way. You've got your instrument, and you're telling stories from the context of being a traveler. So you've picked up all these different souvenirs along the way, and maybe a few ailments, and worries, and broken love stories, and you've left people behind, And it's that's where the folk element is so strong as well. The connection with, like he comes from a shipbuilding community where sometimes people would go out to sea for a long time, and go on rigs and stuff like that. There's so much to it, that's the inspiration. It's not really about boy and girl and, like who's, like that kind of party lifestyle and which I like too. I like
Yeah.
those kind of songs too, love songs.
Or AC/DC.
Yeah, well, another great guitar player, by the way, and or Malcolm, the
Both of
rhythm,
them. Both of them.
both of them. Malcolm Young is one of the top 5 greatest rhythm guitar players ever. But no, but I get what you mean about the Chaucerian kind of connection, but also musically, I hear with Sting's music, I do hear the kind of Purcellian,
Yeah.
and also
I mean, he's a big fan of
Russian harmony and jazz. Jazz. He's a total jazz fanatic. He sees himself as like a wannabe jazz musician. He's always wanted to. He loves hanging out with jazz musicians and talking shit, and like he loves it when Christian McBride or Branford, Eddie Marsalis is around, and they just talk and they hang. And Kenny Kirkland. I mean, Kenny Kirkland is the master of Sting language, harmonic language, and that's my compass right there. That's where
Kenny said, I remember watching an interview with Kenny, and he said he could sit down and play jazz standards with Sting on double bass. And he said he was fantastic, And he's like, I mean, we're saying all this. He's really good looking. He's very charismatic. He's a brilliant songwriter. He's a brilliant musician. He's been very successful. He's very rich. I don't you ever want to kill him? And I mean, it's like when God made him, they think, God, what are you doing? It's making us all look bad. I mean, it's like, and I think that I'm serious here. I think it works against him.
It's funny
that Sting he's so good. I loved him. Sting. He's got the lot, hasn't he? I mean, it's like
it works like that in UK because in UK people don't really like their own people being successful.
No, that's exactly
in America.
It. Yeah.
And it never really works. It's like Coldplay or like, oh, they're big in America, so we're going to disown them.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, no, I don't know. It's just one of those things.
Are you aware of that being inside it? That there's this. I feel when you get truly great musicians like that, and I've said these. I mean, Sting is as much of a pop star, and he's iconic. You could have the Encyclopedia of Rock, and so maybe you put Kurt Cobain on the front, and you put Sting on the front. He could sit there doing that job as well. It's quite an incredible musician that I don't think gets. He's so good. I felt this was the same with Prince until he died. Once Prince died, he's a genius. He's a genius. But before that, it was also, I don't like Prince. I was going, why? How could you not like Prince?
Yeah.
And it's the same.
Well, actually, it's funny. I met Sting when I met him. I was 29 years old. That's when I joined the band, and this is 35 years ago. Do the math. And he was 38, and I thought, as you would as a young man, I thought he's really old, and. And I thought, I might as well catch the end of his career, go around the world, just be a bit of a rock star, just have some fun, like live the dream. And then I'm going to get on with my career after that.
Yeah.
And so we did the Soul Cages album and we did the tour, which was really massive. I'd never played in venues like stadiums sometimes, stuff like that. And then now he's 73. Whatever I am, 60 something, and I can't keep up with the guy. And I still think he's old, of course, as I would. But he does look amazing, and yeah, it is annoying, particularly to the British public. Because you're very much part of the British scene,
I know there's a lot of comedy in Sting. You see, I know it's very easy to get comedy at because that's what I do on my channel, and sometimes I will poke that. I was just when you said he's 73 and he's still full of beans. I nearly said it's probably all the tantric sex, and you can crack that joke with Sting, and people will get it. And I think that's because I think to be truly great, you have to be disliked by a certain section to be truly great.
That's very profound. That's true. Actually, it's like John McEnroe syndrome.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of people hated him, but he had that genius quality.
And I've
Yeah,
never
I
understood.
agree with
I
that.
mean, I grew up from, as soon as I was listening to music, well, not listening, but as soon as I started playing the drums, I watched all the interviews. He seems like I would just love to meet him because he's a musician, and I'm sure he just seems completely focused on the music. Every interview I've ever seen, he's focused on what he does,
Totally.
and he's got a sense of humor. You can see that in the music. And he doesn't take himself too seriously. When you look at what he's done, some of the
Oh,
songs.
that's very true. That it's good that you noticed that because that's one thing. That's one common misconception about Sting is that he takes himself seriously. And I usually come to his defense because out of all the people I know in the music business, he's the one that least takes himself
Well,
seriously.
that's what I've picked up, and of course I'm
He's a
British.
very generous guy. He's got a sense of humor. He's a Geordie, so he's got that tongue in cheek, and he's got that Northern English sense of humor, which has never gone away. And he can be self-deprecating, but his job is to look amazing. That's become almost like his brand. It's like, oh my God, Sting, he's so fit. He's been doing the yoga, the sex, the whatever. He looks fucking great, but he sings great. That's almost like a job. So when he would be the first to admit that he does all this stuff for vanity reasons. It's not because he feels that he should be healthy. No, he wants to look good. He knows that. He'll openly admit that because that's the job. If you're, a sort of a pin-up who's also talented and writes killer songs and a humanitarian and, like it's got all these different things going on. It's a job, and it can be misconstrued easily. So I usually come to his defense with that,
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad we've been able to do it in here, and I'm glad we've been able to go. I mean, we've covered so much stuff, and I'm glad to be able to be, champion Sting. I hope he watches this video. You better tell him, go and check Andy out. Go and watch that video because we've said all nice things about him and also a few little jokes. I'm sure you won't mind. But we'll see whether you're right. You might get very angry and put a contract out on me with.
You should come to the show, man, and you'll meet him.
Pardon?
You should come to a gig.
Oh, no, just couldn't meet Sting. The thing is that I do have some inside knowledge of this because I played for Robert Plant for 3 years, and he's an ethos type of, the perception of Robert Plant, he is like that, but he's more than that, and people never really understand what Robert's really like. And when you get to know him, because he's funny, he's self-deprecating. I mean, when I was on tour with him, we could because he was Robert Plant, we could almost go, Robert, can you do this? Can you do that? And he would join in on these silly games of, let's get Robert to go up the bar and act silly or something. And he'd do it. He was very down to earth, very funny, understood that he was a rock god. We used to call him Rock God, for example.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the thing about those guys, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all those super groups from the 70s, is that they weren't really celebrities.
No.
Where that celebrity it sort of started with Bowie, when that whole, what do they eat and where do they live? And, pictures of them walking out of a hotel. That didn't happen with Zeppelin.
Not with Zeppelin, no.
They could take a bus, and it's like, it's Jimmy Page or it's Robert Plant, but it wasn't this hysteria around celebrity. That Sting is very much in that, everywhere we go, he gets recognized. The selfie culture that we live in now, it's like everybody wants the selfie, and but I didn't feel that Pink Floyd, who are arguably the biggest band of all time, most influential. I mean, come on, and Zeppelin. I mean, are you kidding?
But I think what's happened is that, and I always felt it happened around about Live Aid, is that these people grew up in this era that has changed. It's changed and changed, and around about Live Aid, the rock bands went from being young guys that kids liked, which is what it was, to suddenly you get this sort of legend thing emerge. And I love it. I love the legend thing, but I also like to poke fun at it because I'm aware of because you just hit the nail on the head. Because when I got the gig with Robert, I was 30 and he was 52, and it was like granddad. I'm now way older than him, you know, and
Yeah.
it was that generational thing. And these people are now in their 70s, and for some reason, possibly because they were part of something so magical, we can't let them go.
No,
You know what I'm
that's,
saying? Nobody wants to let them go. And
that's
it's
amazing.
amazing.
But it's really good to meet you, Andy. And
Yeah.
like I said before, I really like your content, and it's good because it's thought provoking. I've seen a lot of your videos, and you know, I've turned some of my mates onto it, and because I like the way that the humorous element to it, and you're a serious musician. You know, you really love music. You do it for the right reasons. You know, I like talking to people who are really that passionate about
And
music.
me, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, and you've been so articulate. And on top of being, I mean, some musicians are brilliant, but they're not that articulate. But you've covered so much on this interview. There's so much there. I've got to work a way out and title it so that it gets all clickbaited. Everyone else, I've got Sting plastered all over it, you know, and I've got to do that and do this, you know. But in there's some stuff, and there's a couple of things you've said because of the insights you've had and being such a great player yourself, and then having the experience. Because I used to say to my students, "So how do you get to great? How do you become a really great player?" And I said, "You have to get the gig." It's the getting the gig that makes you great. I said you could stick anybody in a massive band and stick them out on tour. 6 months later, they're going to come back way better because
Yeah.
you learn. It was the same thing with me. When I got these big gigs and I was out playing, that's when I became a player. And you start to learn about economy and communicating to a large audience when you play, and gestures and shapes. And I think your experience as a musician has been, I mean, very unique. You know, 35 years with one of the great iconic pop or rock stars, whatever you want to call it, of the last 40
Yeah.
odd years. It's very
I'm
good.
aware of that. I mean, I pinch myself every day. But I think the most important thing really to go into music and to be in a band and to be successful is you've really got to leave your ego at home. You can't bring that with you because that will be sniffed out. There's no context where that works unless you're the front man and that's what you're doing. You're conveying a kind of front man type of ego. But the best
So
front man,
that's fake as well, isn't it? They put that on, don't they? Because
it's an act.
yeah,
That's
because
part of the
nobody
act.
could, because they have to also convey some element of vulnerability. The great artists are vulnerable, aren't they? At the same time, there's a
Sure.
vulnerability there that is in somewhere in there, and for each artist, it's different. You know, think of someone like Robert Smith, and it's all vulnerable. You know, but it can't all just be bravado.
No,
And so,
and it's theater. It's theater. You know,
yeah,
it's entertainment, and you've got the best musicians are the ones who understand theater. I go for inspiration. I don't go to that many gigs, but every time I go to fringe theater or just to see disjointed or you know, like actors were starting out in their careers, that's one of my favorite things to do is to see that collaboration. And it's the best musicians are the ones who understand what theater is and that type of interaction because you can't
that's the rare. Do you
possibly.
think that's the rarest quality of musicians who actually understand the theatre of it? It's not about there's millions of chopsy players, there's people who can play giant steps so the cow comes home, and there's all that, and that. But the truly great musicians that have that and the ability to perform to an
Hmm.
audience is few and far between.
Well,
And
Miles had that.
yeah,
Miles cared deeply about how it was
so,
getting
so
across.
true,
And
so
so
true.
he was a theater director. He brought characters into his band who could play different roles, but it was all about how is the connection with the audience, which is what he had his back to the audience, but that was part of the theater.
Yeah, did you see him live?
I did,
Yeah,
yeah.
and me.
I
And
saw him
as
in
soon
the
as he walked
80s
out on
with
stage,
Stone, and
we were all like this. It was
it
like
was
the
all a
whole
bit of,
thing was like tense.
yeah, it was weird. I didn't understand what I was watching or seeing or hearing, but it was just next level. But I just thought he was so cool. I couldn't take my eyes off him. Here's a musician who could stand on the side of the stage like this while his band are playing, but it's still him. That is next level.
Yeah, I mean, and this keyboard player started playing, and he's building his solo, and Miles turns his trumpet round. He says into his mic, he says, "Do you have to play so goddamn loud?" And the guy just went like that, and then you can see the whole band, and then it suddenly goes into this like tense space, And suddenly it's back
Oh,
in the because what he was doing, he'd gone off, and it's like Miles wanted there's like
yeah,
this intense focus, and he obviously didn't play the contracts, the contracted time, and at some point he walked off, and the
yeah.
band didn't know what to do, so they jammed for a while, then they all walked off, and then they must have said, we need to make another 10 minutes up, and so the percussionist came back on, and he did some juggling.
Oh, you're kidding? Really?
Yeah, he did a percussion solo because he'd run out of that. He'd done like the 10 minutes of that, and then he came to the stage. He did some juggling, and everyone cheered him. It was great, and then he walked off, and then we sat, and then the lights came up, and that was the end of the gig. It
So
really
cool.
was like anti-theatre. It was so, but the feeling, I mean, just seeing Miles Davis in real life. I'm sure you had it when you walked out. It was like, oh, and a connection to something so deep. I
Yeah,
felt,
it's just the highest level. And as I said, every musician who's been part of that culture, his culture, is gone on to greatness because they've been infected by that philosophy, that aesthetic of listening, complimenting each other, and playing roles. And it's not about virtuosity. There's a place for virtuosity. I love virtuosity. I'm every time. I just love to watch it. I think, wow, how does he do that? There's this Italian kid who plays guitar. I saw him,
Matteo Mancuso.
yeah, I think,
Yeah.
wow, that's amazing. He's a great musician. It's very easy to knock these people, but
He
I'm
needs
not,
a band, doesn't he? Don't you feel he needs a band? He
yeah, he
needs
needs a
to be
band.
playing
He
it.
needs to get on the road.
He needs some songs. I
Yeah,
want to hear him with some songs and in a band, and he plays, and he has to fit his style into that. And what's he going to come up with? That's what I want to. That's what I want to hear him do. That just doesn't seem to be there. I had this conversation with Al Di Meola. He said boastfully, name dropping. But when I spoke to Al, it's like Al Di Meola is a composer and as well as a guitar player, and he's had to work with people like Chick Corea, and he's had to develop what he does within this other context, which he's found himself. But a lot of these players coming out now on the internet, they've worked out this thing, and it's almost like a circus trick, isn't it? And they are incredible, but where's the tunes and where's the songs and where's
but
the
actually, Al Di Meola, a shredder, was the first sort of shredder in jazz with a Les Paul kind of a bigger
yeah,
sound. Is a great writer.
great
That
writer.
album, Elegant Gypsy, every tune on that is immaculate. And I just think he's a slightly misunderstood guitarist
He is. Have you heard the
because
Acid
he's a
solo
shredder.
album?
He's kind of got that geek quality. Um, like it probably comes from hanging out with Chick Corea, that type of. He was very young when he was in
Yeah,
that band, wasn't he? So
yeah,
I think he must have been in awe of Chick Corea or something, or that level of
yeah. He
jazz
worshipped
in
Chick
those
Corea.
days, and Stanley when he was breaking out, and Lenny White, I think it might have been
Yeah,
playing drums. And I really think Al Di Meola is a great writer, a really, really good writer.
but that whole
One of the
boss.
best. That's why I put him in
Yeah,
my top 10 because of that.
yeah. Were you? But I know we've got to go but it's so interesting talking to you. I could
Yeah.
be here for 3 hours. I also want to ask you about the How Insensitive session that Sting did, which I think is the version of How Insensitive. Were you on that session that he did for the Red Hot?
How insensitive. No,
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Have you not heard that? This will be a great
Really?
way to end. Sting did a version of How Insensitive for the Red Hot and Cool album, which was an AIDS tribute, and there was George Michael was on there. I think it was How Insensitive. Now you get me down. I thought you, because with your love of Bossa Nova, I thought Dominic must have played on that.
I played on a lot of things that I haven't heard. I probably did because I've done most of what he's done in the last 35 years. I don't even know how many albums I've recorded with him.
Oh,
It's
I'll
easily
send, I'll
10.
send you a link to it. See if you're on it. It's beautiful. It's just
Well, I know that song really well. There's a good chance that we played it because I know he's a fan of Bossa Nova. We hung out with Antonio Carlos Jobim in Rio de Janeiro, And actually, I'll give you a little story. So we hung out with him, and then a couple of years later, he perished. God bless him. And that day, I was in my hotel room, and I came up with a motif, which was a song called La Belle Dame sans regret, which is on the Mercury Falling album. And
Yeah.
it's one of these tunes that I just totally dedicated it to Jobim, and it wrote itself. This happens very rarely to musicians, where you're sitting there with the piano or the guitar or the vibraphone, whatever it is, and you're just a
Giving it.
passenger. The tune writes itself. It's like that's inspiration. That only happens occasionally, and when it does, grab it. But that's when we wrote that tune. And so then it was the same as Shape of My Heart. So he said, "What is that?" And I'm going, "Well, just this fell from the sky." And he said, "We got to do a tune to that,
I feel like I'm taking up your time now, Mr. Miller, so I'm
No,
going.
it's all right. It's okay. But it's great to talk to you, Andy. And
Are you up for coming back again at some point?
oh yeah, anytime. We could talk about crisps or
Well,
talk about.
I have got this concept of taking, incredible legendary musicians like yourself and just not giving the audience what they want and just talking about our favorite Carry On films for an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
Just getting into
Yeah, I'm into that. Yeah, because I'm not, I'm not an expert on music or anything, but I have other interests, and for sure, but I totally I identify with your kind of comedic and side to music, and I love your top tens. They're very provocative, but really thought provoking.
I don't believe some of it. I mean, it's like I mean, Aisha being overrated is a technical. Anything that's everybody worships is overrated. I mean, and sometimes it's just a little bit of I don't know, being iconoclastic and just. I mean, there's so many things like that. I mean, when I say I hate Astral Weeks, I mean that though. But that was coloured by the tour I did with Van Morrison.
That was recorded in one day, that album.
Yeah, I know.
I'm about to
Sounds
go
like.
and record an album with ECM, my fourth one, and it's really like that. You go in the studio, 2 days recording.
You're giving me more material to ask. I want to know about Manfred Eicher now. I want to know what that is
All
going.
right, yeah. No, but I mean that is like doing a record with him is a bit like it's an intimidating experience, but it's also very stimulating because you're in a room with a guy we know his history. He did, all those Pat Metheny albums, those John Cromie albums, Ralph Towner, Alberto Gismonti, it's like Keith, oh my God. So I'm with that producer and that engineer, Jan Erik, God bless him, he passed away. So I'm in Rainbow Studios in Oslo with Manfred Eicher and Jan Erik. And it's like, I feel less than myself. What he does is he's got this ability to get a performance out of musicians that the musicians couldn't get out of themselves. If you think about it, compare it to acting, which seems to have been a common theme with theatrical theme. It's like if you had a film director take an idea, a book or a poem, you could use Spielberg or you could go to Hitchcock or Polanski. And Manfred is more the latter. And he will pull out performances from people that will make them feel probably a bit insecure. So when I'm working in the studio with Manfred, I have a feeling of insecurity. However, I also feel somewhat empowered by virtue of the fact that I'm in this situation. So if you think about Woody Allen as another good example, getting really good actors to get performances that they wouldn't normally come up with. So that's what it's like being in the studio.
Miles is like a director, and he does it. And you're saying something really profound here: is that everybody's aiming to be in this place, the Mount Olympus of music, in this hallowed place, and we see it as a hallowed place. You see Manfred Eicher, you're in a hallowed place. But what happens when you get into that hallowed place is you're exposed. And there's a part of it which you're not in control with. And the greatness is the lack of control which is embodied.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And it's like what you end up with is a photograph of yourself that you might not like. You don't like the angle or the lighting, but it is a better photograph than the one that you would take, which is a lot of albums that people make. And I've done that myself, end up being something comparable to a selfie. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is how I present myself, and with all the technology we have now, we can fix things, we can tune things. There's no fixing with Manfred, mate. You know, if he hears a mistake, not only is he not going to let you fix it, but he'll probably turn it up. And now I remember when I was 17, listening to Egberto Gismonti or Keith Jarrett, or it's those misarticulations that pulled my heartstrings.
So
So
the great artists are truly great because they're they're able to easily expose the part of us which is we don't want to expose.
exactly, but that is the truth. That ends
That's
up
the
being the
truth.
truth. And the
That is what
public,
people mean by
peop-
artistic truth, isn't it?
yeah,
And then
the
human
public,
beings. So all
people
this chop thing is important because sometimes you need that. But really, what makes great art is a human being able to see their frailty in somebody else that is truly great at communicating that frailty. Have we got to something where
and submit it
and
and
some yeah
submit it.
to the
You know,
world?
because that's the next stage of, part of the process. It's like I'll listen back after being in the studio. I'll work on something for 4 or 5 months in the studio for 2 days. So it's all gone into that moment. I'll listen, preferably not the next day. I've been advised never to listen to
No.
your recording.
Yeah.
Just wait 2 weeks. Listen, and I'll go, oh God, I'm rushing here. And some guitar magazine's going to go, ooh, or some guitar nerd in Japan's going to go like, oh, he's playing the wrong chord here. It's like, and I'll be thinking all this stuff. I want to go in and fix it. Full depression. But Manfred's calling me up, going, it sounds fantastic. And I'm going, really? And then I'll leave it some more time. And then I'll listen again and it will sound better. And then years later, you're so grateful that you didn't have access to the tools to perfect your imperfections.
What you're saying here is, I mean, I'm 56. I've done music my whole life. I've come to the same conclusion. And what you're saying, that observation, that the day you do it, when you hear it, you may as well not listen to it because you're no judge of what you've just done because it'll sound terrible to you.
Yeah.
And I come back, 2 or 3 years later and listen to it. It goes, I was doing really well then, and I can't actually hear what I heard before. I can hear something else, and yet there's stuff I've done a long time ago which I thought was great. And then now I hear it just sounds like there's ego. It's just my ego.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about the highest thing here in terms of art. It really is. And
Oh, it is. It's high level. As performance art, it really is. It doesn't get higher than that. And to be in the presence of someone who's encouraging you to express yourself through composition and improvisation. It's such a privilege, and to do it with great musicians around you, and it's almost like a sort of it's like being on a film set, doing a record with Manfred. I don't feel like I'm in a studio. There's no grid. I mean, we're not doing everything to click. No way. So it's like recording to tape, like the old days, and there's no fixing. And you will never do more than 2 takes on a tune. Hence, you're in the studio for 2 days, and then the mix happens. Then it's all over, and I'm like emotionally drenched at the end of it.
when the Pro Tools thing came in around about, I'd say 2010, when it was just ubiquitous, I would be turning up to do albums and I'd start drumming and you'd almost like got halfway through the track when they go, stop, it's yeah, we've got that. Because all they're listening to is the drum loop.
Yeah.
And then they could do it, could you do a few fills? And then you play and then they go, yeah, we're all sorted now. And then you'd be walking out making your cheese cob in the kitchen while they're putting it together. They're quantizing it all. They're re-triggering the bass drum. They're like going, which drum fill do you think was the best then? I'm like, well, it's not the best. It's the context. That one when I rushed was good because we would go, oh, but you don't like it rushing. And I actually got out of music because of it. I couldn't stick it. And I went off and became a music teacher. That was the reason why. It used to make me feel sick. I'd hear these albums back that I played on, and I was thinking, well, why have I bothered to do all this all my life? They're just destroying everything I've ever worked for. I really reacted badly to it.
Yeah.
And I just really, and it's like a lot of modern popular music. People knock it, but I think the songwriting's very strong. I think they just need to go in and do it live. even like the sort of dance music in the old days, that singer would perform that in one take.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
or they'd be sampling and triggering the sampling. It
Well,
sounds
listen
like
to Earth, Wind and Fire. Earth, Wind and Fire. Those tracks weren't done to click. The tempo at the end of the song is completely different to the tempo at the beginning. Not necessarily faster, sometimes even slower. You know what I mean? And how good is that production?
I've got one in the car at the moment, and I drive around and I think to myself, I'm listening to September, and I'm thinking, this is my Bach. You know, you went on about Bach on the Rick Beato,
Yeah,
and you have to,
yeah.
yeah, it might be Bach for you. It's Earth, Wind and Fire to me because the drummer and Verdine White's bass playing and the way they work within that song structure is unbelievable. It's like nuclear physics of the rhythm section. You
Oh,
know,
it's crazy. And the mix too.
the mixes, and you think, how are they that I mean, it's astonishing when you listen to Earth, Wind and
It's
Fire.
really, it's the highest level. That and Stevie Wonder in
Yeah.
that period of time. I haven't, and obviously when Michael Jackson was the early Michael Jackson
Well,
and
the
Quincy.
off the wall Michael Jackson and
No, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Such a good
unbelievable.
production, and Quincy Jones, the dude, that album, and all this. It's like this is next level stuff, man. I mean, Quincy Jones, God bless him, by the way.
Yeah,
What a huge influence he was.
wow, what a man. I think the only guy left that's like that is my friend Narada Michael Walden, the friend of my
Yeah.
channel. He's another one. No, and he's an energy source. If you talk to Narada, I'm sure you've met him.
Yeah, I have actually. I'm a huge admirer of his work, and with Jeff Beck, and with all kinds of people. What a great musician. But we could go on all day.
Go on and on. It's just I'll message Narada. He's become a real good friend of mine. He's my idol. Not just drum wise, but production wise. I just think the guy's incredible. He's like a younger Quincy Jones to me. Real,
Oh, for sure, for sure. We need more people like that in the business. People who just see the big picture. It's like a good director. It's just
yeah.
who understand first of all the artist and the song. Who is the artist first, but then when you get into the songs, the song becomes the key, and
Yeah.
you make this piece of art into something that's just generous and giving, egoless. There's a time and a place for ego and virtuosity, though. I'm not against it.
No, same here.
I do like a very articulate solo. That's what I find about fusion generally. And when we talked about Holsworth, it's just so highly intellectual. I feel like I'm having listening to a lecturer, and I don't really understand what he's saying, but I want to pretend that I do, because he does these chord solos, like it's like every note is a chord, and I'm going, hang on, can you just slow down a bit? It's like that Zawinul thing. That's why I love Zawinul so much, because he will just go do ba bam space. And Wayne Shorter is just standing there, just like everybody's chilled. And then he'll do it again. Boom, bam, boom. And it's just like, this is the highest level of sonic art, I think.
And the thing with Zawinul is no one understands the level of virtuosity he had. Jarrett, Chick Corea, incredible virtuosity level, but Zawinul, I mean, there's classical pianists, 20th century classical pianists who have said if Zawinul had been a classical pianist, he would have been one of the greatest.
I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's sadly no longer with us, a great keyboardist. He had a bootleg of Zawinul warming up at on a sound check on piano, and it was like Art Tatum. It was just the amount of technique that Zawinul is not using. The amount this is why he is so. I mean, I think he's one of the greatest of the fusion era. Actually, I think his vision was something else.
Sure.
But yeah, it's like he had keyboards that were like the wrong way round. With the low note to the right, and he would play upside down, and all those Jacko things that we're all astonished at. Zawinul's mirroring them with his left hand.
Yeah. So that's what Teen Town was, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, I saw that band, that Weather Report band, with
Jacko.
Jacko, these 1979. I saw them in Hammersmith. I mean,
Mm.
to be a young man, and kid, seeing that was just his life is transforming.
Now, what was it
You're
like seeing
never
Jacko
the same
charisma
after.
wise? Was there
Sorry?
what was it like seeing Jacko charisma wise? Because I think that's the X factor
Oh,
of
nothing
Jacko.
but charisma, just oozing charisma. He just stood there. He had the shades on. He was barefoot, and he was just like this all night. He didn't move, and he was quite cognizant that he wasn't, because he had. I now know, having read the book, Bill Mikulski book, that he was having a rough time around there. But he had a good show that night.
Yeah.
He was on, just dealing, giving it some, just looking cool. And I thought, he's a total rock star in jazz. See, they started the rock stardom in jazz. It didn't exist before then,
No.
except
No, they don't get credit for
always
this.
cool.
They don't get credit. I think Sting is of that era. I think he's the British version of that. He's a proper jazz player and he can do all that. It's the same thing, but he's also a rock star, and I think he's a product of jazz fusion in a bizarre way. That
Yeah.
he comes out of Return to Forever, really. That I
Yeah, because
think.
no one in Return to Forever was really cool.
I think Stanley Clarke was, and I think Aldi. I don't think Chick Corea was. The rest of them
I
were
mean,
not
if you,
Stanley
if you
Clarke.
looked at I mean, if you look at the audience in a fusion show, let's be honest for a second. It's mostly geezers,
Yeah,
right? This is something I think about when I do shows with my band. It's like if I see a lot of geezers, I sort of think, we've got to sort this out. I'm not doing music for musicians. I'm not doing it. So I might do a clinic or something, or like a guitar show, and there'll be a lot of guitar players there, like, okay, Dominic Miller, let's see what it's all about then. And I'm like, oh God, feel exposed here. But there might be a girlfriend who's sitting with one of the guitarists and sort of like filing her nails while my music is going on. I am playing the music for her. I'm not thinking about the guitar player. I'm not thinking about the shredders in the room. I'm thinking, how can I connect with the one who's filing her nails? And this is then what I want is for her to walk away from the gig thinking, this was fantastic, the best night I've had for ages, life transforming, hopefully. That's the
yeah.
idea when you do a gig. And for her to bring her mates next time.
Well, it's a rare thing.
And not with the geezer, leave them at home practicing.
This is what people like Eddie Van Halen and had as in bucket loads. I mean, they're incredible players, but there's something else. I feel like I'm keeping you on. We're covering so much stuff. I think
Eddie Van Halen, we'll end with Eddie Van Halen.
you're going to have to come back on again because I just love talking to you. There's so
Okay.
much. We're going to have to. There's going to be a part two, everybody. You promised me that, don't you? There'll be a part two.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, what's the time now? We've been in here for
We'll do a season.
up and down. This is like the Martin Taylor interview where he was like.
We didn't talk about him either. Another badass. Okay, enough.
Yeah, you just love music like me. That's
Yeah.
the thing. That's what comes across. We love music. Thank
Yeah.
God for music.
Yeah, thank you.
It wrecks your life, but in the end, it's.
And thanks you for your channel, mate. It's a great channel.
Oh, thank you so much. I was so proud when I saw that you were
Yeah.
watching it. I told everybody I knew. I said, I can't believe this, Dominic. I told everybody I knew. I rang up the Sting in my old tribute band, and he wants to ring me as soon as we get out of this, so I can report back. Because the amount of conversations we've had about not the police, but looking at Sting's show that you're on, and then trying to go, how do we do a tribute to this? Because it was a Sting and the police tribute I was in. So it's just, but it's funny how you have these interests and loves and all this, and then you connect. And we've connected. And this has happened over and over again. I just find it incredible, and it makes me feel a little bit better about my career. I think, well, at least I showed it a lot of love, and it's coming back.
Well, I feel very privileged to be a part of your scene here as you're kind of about to go to global.
I will do.
Before that.
Yeah, I'm chasing Mr. Rick Beato. He's got to watch it. I know he's worried. That's why he won't mention me. He won't mention me on his channel because he knows if he does, everyone's going to go, well, there's the real deal there, Mr. Andy Edwards.
He's a good guy. He's a good geezer.
Oh,
he's
you
just
know
like
him.
us,
You know him as
you
well.
can talk to him for hours. And I went for an Italian meal with him, and we just couldn't stop rabbiting all.
He's my inspiration now. You know, when I started YouTubing, it was Rick Beato. There's so much things he's said about YouTubing that I've taken to heart. The biggest one being just talk about whatever you want to talk about. So I will talk about crisps, or I'll talk about multiculturalism, or I'll talk about anything I want to talk about. I have an idea, and then I'll talk about it. And I love doing this because it's the jazz thing. It's like I feel that you have said some profound things today about music. My hair's stood on end a number of times, and there's a journey towards us getting there. We couldn't just sit down and talk about this, you know, off the cuff. We've had to work to get to that stuff, and part of it is our different experiences. There's a unity in between that, and you have said some profound things about music. If there's a musician watching that, you know, at some point at the sort of climax of this video, you were speaking the truth. And it was about humility and being able to expose what you cover up, what the imposter syndrome covers up almost. We all have, you know, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing for you to have communicated that, and I'm really pleased because I don't want to just be here getting views. I do want to do something that's worthwhile, and you've done that for me. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
For the viewers, I like to do it like a kids, like play away. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
See you next time.
Bye bye.